and Luqman Hayes is going to be presenting the first paper. And Luqman is the Scholarly Communications Team Leader in the Library and Learning Support Services at AUT. He has more than 10 years' experience of working in both public and tertiary libraries in the UK and in New Zealand, with a background in journalism, editing, and writing stretching back to the 1980s. These two worlds combined when he held the 2-year editorship of the Library Association of New Zealand's Aotearoa monthly journal, Library Life. A keen supporter of the open access movement, he's interested in exploring the possibilities which scholarly communications provide to enhance the quality and visibility of research on a global scale. And the co-author of this paper is Shari Hearn, who is the Director of Learning and Research Services at AUT. She unfortunately is unwell and so is not able to be with us today. So I hand over now to Luqman to talk to us about THETA and how being open is the key to scholarly communications.
Tēnā koutou katoa, no tamaki makaurau hau, hi kaitiaki puka puka o ki te wānanga o Aronui o Tāmaki Makaurau. Ko Luqman Hayes ahau. Ko nui te mihi ki a koutou katoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to think my writing career goes back to the 90s rather than 80s. I don't know who wrote that bio, but I'm not actually that old. The hair went when I was in my 20s, honestly. So the other gag I had was that seeing as there's so few of us here, we could have an interactive session. What do you think? Okay, so this is the story of THETA. He gets his clicker. Which is the name we chose for the project to set up an open access journal publishing platform at AUT. But it's also the story of embracing the spirit and ethos of open access, and perhaps also on drawing on indigenous knowledge paradigms and keeping an eye on what lies ahead in terms of both open access and the scholarly communications landscape. Thinking about THETA enabled us to think of it as the core of something actually much bigger. The word itself, which means be open, holds for us greater significance as a scholarly communications team, as a library, and possibly also as an institute of learning. Okay, so I could tell you all about the setup, and we could talk about who was involved, and we could talk about how we chose the particular software that we did, and all the technical aspects of it, and the governance and the MOUs with the editors, and how we trained them, and moving their processes to a submission and review system which was all online and integrated. But you probably don't want to hear about that. And if you do, then you can read the paper that Shari and I wrote, and that there should be a link to that somewhere on the website. Okay, that's good. No, instead I would like to talk about what we learned. Sorry about the notes. This project enabled us to reflect on knowledge and on the dissemination of knowledge in a philosophical and perhaps arguably in a bicultural way. For us, THETA has become a concept that lies at the heart of all the work that we do, supporting and sharing research at AUT. So we set up an open access publishing platform that looks just like that. We used an open source program called Open Journal Systems, and that's something that was developed by the Public Knowledge Project. It's been around for quite some time. And we started with 2 peer-reviewed, established journals edited by staff at AUT. And that was officially launched in October last year. So many of you may be familiar with Open Journal Systems already. It's used by thousands of universities worldwide. And some key examples in New Zealand are Otago and Victoria University in Wellington. And those of you who are familiar with OJS will be familiar with its somewhat user-unfriendly interfaces and rather clunky, old-fashioned web design. This is version 2.4 of the OJS interface, or journal sites that you get, and this is using the out-of-the-box typical themes that you can get with the product. It's taken quite some time for, being an open source platform, it's taken quite some time for a new version of OJS to emerge, but it actually did towards the end of 2016, and we'll get to that in a bit. But what we found through a little bit more of research is that there were people out there who'd customized and done something a little bit different with the old version of OJS. And this is a journal published by the Mason Publishing Group from George Mason University in the United States of Trumpland. And we decided that was a much cleaner and more user-friendly design that we could adapt and customize for our journals. It seemed to represent something for us that we were aspiring to in terms of clean design, user-friendliness, and so on. And so we took that design and used it for ourselves. Now, of course, we also wanted to develop some kind of shopfront for what we were doing, our journal service. And it would have been tempting, given the kind of resource constraints that we have in our little unit, to create a simple page with some links to the journals that we were publishing, and that would have been buried somewhere on the library's website. But we felt we were forming something of a unique identity, and we wanted to do something that reflected that. So it was also around this time that we reflected on a name for the service. And we felt it was perhaps more significant to lead with a Māori name, and that this might, in some ways, be a nod towards our obligations under the treaty, but it might also be more inclusive in a bicultural sense, as well as being something which was uniquely Oceanian. We felt that the word THETA was a good fit as a concept which encompasses all that we wanted to do with AUT-edited scholarship. And we consulted Māori members of staff and academic staff, and in particular Dr. Valent Smith, and when we launched the service, we did so with a strong Māori flavour, with karakia, with waiata, and plenty of kai. And we looked outside the usual examples, so these are three good examples of university publishing sites, but we felt there were maybe more inspiration could be found elsewhere. And so this was a site that appealed to us quite a lot. This is a site called, well, it's part of a site called the Maker Bus, which is a makerspace organization in the States. And there are a lot of elements to this which were very appealing. It's warm, it's welcoming, it's not only that, but it's designed very well. It's got a clean and clear interface. And that seemed to resonate with the similar vision and, of course, that core concept for us, which was openness. And so from this, we get this. Now, in terms of the individual journal sites themselves, it's useful to look at them. It's useful to look at them in terms of some of the benefits of open access. Applied Finance Letters, which was actually our first journal, went from being a largely print, or a journal with a print run of around 1,000 copies throughout New Zealand, and a list of static PDFs linked on this site here. And went from that to that, which is, as you can see, is that George Mason design applied to them. And obviously that opened up its scholarship to a completely different audience. But rather than me tell you all about that, I'm going to hand over to its editor.
As the Open Center for Financial Research, we publish our own journal, and we started publishing in 2012. And while that journal is very successful for us, since about a year we've been looking for ways to actually make our journal and the material that we publish more accessible to researchers, to academics. And we've also been looking for a platform that would help us with the submission and the review process. And so the launch of this website, THETA, for us came at a very good point in very delighted to work with the library and get our journal published on their website. So for us, this has been a very good experience. It's been a very good experience working with the library, getting this set up, and the tool that we have now is very, very useful for us. It makes the review process very straightforward, which was exactly what we were looking for, and will make the research that we publish much more visible to the academic community.
Okay, so the obvious takeaway from what Bart's saying there is that AUT Library is pretty damn awesome. If I'm not, that was the key lesson, I thought. More seriously, improved access, increased visibility, and of course, the knock-on effects of that are increased citations and the additional benefits to not only the individual researcher, but the institute itself, and that obviously fosters the growth of discourse. But what about where access to research is a little bit more difficult, and where discourse is harder to achieve? Now, Pacific Journalism Review, which was our second journal, has been established for about 22 years and covers a lot of the issues affecting many of the less developed regions, particularly in the South Pacific. This is its old site, its new site. Now, given that, I'll just explain, it's very similar, obviously, because the journal editor themselves makes a lot of decisions around the design aspects of what goes into their page. If it was down to us, we'd probably strip that down a little bit more. But for those areas with poorer access to research, PJR is a very good example of what open access can do.
Open access available for us is a tremendous step forward for our readers. Many of our readers have been asking for open access for some time now, and it's really an opportunity that we're going to be able to have some benefits from this. Particularly in some areas, in the South Pacific in particular, and the Asian region, to have open access to a journal such as ours, which has been going for 22 years now, is a really important step forward.
So there you go, he says it himself. The impact is beyond the ordinary reaches of what is contained within the institution. It goes out into new regions and potentially fosters new research. So it's a good impact for the wider society. Now, since then, we have added a third title to THETA, and this is Te Kaharoa, published by Te Arapotama, one of the units at AUT, and that is using the third version of OJS, and you can see it's a completely different setup, a much cleaner design, and really we haven't had to do too much with that to make it look like that, apart from just take an image and do a little bit of work around that. Otherwise, it's a pretty clean site. On top of this, we've been approached by several staff at AUT who are wanting to get new publications off the ground, in particular to highlight some of the emerging research which is coming out of AUT. And interestingly, a lot of this is not necessarily set up in the traditional peer-reviewed journal sort of way. That what they're looking at doing is targeting practitioners and other parts of the community, and in particular setting up more of a communication with the industry that their discipline relates to. So it's quite unique research content that doesn't follow that traditional route. And perhaps the key point here is that there is a desire from within the university to communicate that research with a wider community and not just within the confines of the academy. And we see that as an acknowledgement that sharing research in this way has clear and tangible benefits for not only the researchers involved, but also for the potential for attracting future funding and collaboration. And it's that sense of community that we feel embodies the spirit of THETA. And it also gives us a clue to what THETA has the potential to be, which is more than just a journal publishing platform. Since my role was established about 1.5 years ago, or when it was established, I should say, I was tasked with looking at a number of different scholarly communications tools or services, not only journal publishing, but solutions around research data management, and also to assist with our existing open access repository, Scholarly Commons. And we've also been approached by staff wanting to find a platform for publicising and sharing summaries of their active research, to host conference proceedings, and potentially also to produce open monographs. There's only 3 of us in our team. This might take some time. Each of them obviously is about finding innovative ways to describe, store, and more importantly, share research openly. So whether that be data, articles, images, or objects, we feel they are all THETA. So in a sense, this concept takes a different shape. We had to have a kind of corporate-looking diagram in here somewhere, and our Deputy Vice-Chancellor loved this, so that's why it's there. So perhaps it's an ecosystem, perhaps it's something else, but what we see is an interrelated and integrated set of tools and services with this concept right at the core of openness, THETA. You've got the summaries, the proceedings, research data management, the open access repository. It's also been suggested that rather than an ecosystem, we could be better represented by an umbrella. Some potential for some new tangible marketing opportunities there. I like the fact that our research data management line is not quite connected to the umbrella. We're getting there. But what this represents is a strategy, and one that will advocate for open access, both at AUT and beyond, throughout the country and perhaps even throughout the region. We'd like to think it will bring open access to the mainstream of scholarly communication and research output in Aotearoa. We'd like to think it will influence how research is disseminated and whom it will benefit, and also the manner in which its impact is assessed. Because of course at the moment we have a current system which relies on very traditional impact measures to gauge success and to reward funding. But what open access does is it enables researchers to go beyond the limits of the paywall. It forces the academic system to reconsider and to perhaps look at alternative methods of assessing impact, and to present a holistic description of research outputs. And it's that word, holistic, that perhaps provides a clue for how all of this connects to Māori knowledge paradigms or indigeneity. If we consider something like Mātauranga Māori or Māori knowledge, it's a complex and open system of knowing the world, according to Anne Salmon. And it can be understood through several different elements, such as whakapapa, kōrero, whakatoki, and waiata. So that's, for those of you who aren't familiar with te reo, genealogy, discussion and conversation, proverbs and song. And it's through the layering and passing on of those stories, those narratives, and that wisdom that the knowledge is considered through Mātauranga Māori. Now, if we consider now how we currently share knowledge and the knowledge that we contribute to, we might question whether knowledge does actually reside with the individual, or whether it's something which is part of the community in which we interact. Who are we actually doing this for? And so these questions, for me, leave us with a bit of a challenge. We operate in an environment which is without any kind of policy or mandate around open access. If we were working in the EU or in the UK, even pre-Brexit UK, open access as a concept is a pretty mainstream thing in academia. Sharing research is expected in those places. It is either completely misunderstood or entirely ignored in this part of the world. And I'm going to leave you, hopefully appropriately, with a whakatoki. One which is arguably overused, but I would suggest has hardly been used at all. Nā tō roro, nā taku roro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your basket and my basket, all of the people can flourish. Kia ora, thank you.